From record-breaking viewership numbers to an equally great critical reception, The Last of Us TV show has been a massive hit for HBO, but it wasn't always touted to be that way. In fact, Troy Baker initially thought the series was destined to fail. I mean, in hindsight, that does sound crazy. If you hear his reasoning, however, it kinda makes sense. Now, if you don't already know, Troy plays Joel in The Last of Us video game, and has a different role in the show as well, so the dude knows what he's talking about. For him, it was the fact that video game adaptations never really pan out great, which made him feel apprehensive about the project. Like, just go through all the dozens and dozens of adaptations we've gotten over the past few decades. You'll struggle to find a handful that were actually great. Though, if you've been paying attention, there's one glaring issue that leads to most game adaptations' downfall: not sticking with the source material. Seriously, just go through all the failed movies or shows we've seen over the past few years. Halo, Tomb Raider, Prince of Persia, most of these failed because they weren't faithful to their OG stories. After all, it's pretty obvious that if you change something that's loved by people, they're probably not gonna like it. The Last of Us, on the other hand, is arguably one of the most faithful video game adaptations out there. Not only does it almost tell the exact same story as the original PS3 game, but it also recreates some of those iconic shots in live action. Oh, and let's not forget, the original creator of the franchise, Neil Druckmann, is also heavily involved with this project. Which means that if they're ever gonna make any changes, everything still makes sense. I mean, video game to a TV show can never be a one-to-one transition. So changes are already necessary. With that said, it's the way you go about these changes. That's what really matters. And, according to Troy Baker, that's where The Last of Us shines the most. After all, the changes it makes are still super relevant to its themes. Take the cordyceps, for example. In the game, the infection spreads through airborne spores. In the show, however, it goes through flour instead. Plus, there are other added elements to the series as well. For instance, the idea that all the infected clickers are a hive mind connected via this network wasn't present in the games at all. Oh, and as far as the actual story beats are concerned, then, well, pretty much the entirety of the third episode is brand new to the series. I mean, the point is that there are obviously a lot of major changes in both the story and the setting, and yet, thematically, it is inarguably The Last of Us. Sure, the details aren't the exact same, but the things that matter, like Joel and Ellie's relationship, their past, and how their characters evolve, all of that important stuff is still preserved. And that's what makes The Last of Us so good. Honestly, in some ways, you could even say that there's no definitive The Last of Us story anymore, as the one that's been written for the show is just as good, if not better, than the OG games. As a matter of fact, this was one of the main fears Troy Baker had before stepping onto the project as well, but now he's fully on board with the idea. Of course he is. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. You could argue, however, that the game did some stuff better.
Yeah, cooked.
Oh, finally some.
While the show presents other story beats in a better way. It's all subjective at the end of the day, though for Troy, it was just hard to wrap his head around anything other than the game being the definitive version of this story. In fact, he even admitted recently that he was skeptical because he didn't want a TV show to supersede the story he told in the game. Once he read the script, however, it all clicked. The show didn't have to compete with the game. Instead, they were two sides of the same coin. Oh, and obviously, he was thinking the same things as we all did before the show came out, like how would they tackle a certain scene or a story beat. But now, he says it's the most accurate and faithful adaptation that he's ever seen. And honestly, you really can't disagree with the guy. The showrunners have managed to capture every tiny detail about what made The Last of Us so great. And sure, you may not find a scene-to-scene recreation here, but still, it gets really close. Though, if there is one thing that's been criticized by the fans, it's Ellie's casting. Now, even though they've been frankly stellar in their role, Bella Ramsey has been getting a lot of hate on social media. Well, the reason is actually quite silly, because, yep, it's the fact that they don't look like Ellie from the games. Like, okay, it would have been understandable if they totally changed the character if their acting was off, but none of those things are true. So, it's just a bit weird to see fans being all up in arms about such a simple thing. Yeah, I can't wait to see how they react to Abby's casting in Season 2, because if this was a bad reaction, then that one's probably gonna turn into utter pandemonium. Plus, there's the whole thing with Ellie's age gap for Season 2 as well. Guess we'll just have to wait and see. For now, the show continues to do extremely well on HBO Max. In fact, unlike most other shows, the viewership numbers are actually increasing with each new episode. With that said, this isn't the only faithful video game adaptation out there. I mean, I'd say that even something like Sonic the Hedgehog is fairly close to the source material. The question is, how come this is getting so much fanfare as compared to everything else? Well, the answer's simple really. The Last of Us story is just that good. Like, there's no two ways about it. It's an objectively good story that has a universal appeal. You've got some super hard-hitting emotional beats right from the get-go. Plus, the action set pieces hit just as well too. Not to mention, the setting is compelling too, because it's just our modern cities turned into wastelands. I mean, sure, it's got all the ingredients of being a great show in and of itself, but when you add creepy infected monsters on top, that's just game over for everyone else then, isn't it? And of course, Troy Baker agrees with that sentiment as well. He talked about how The Last of Us adaptation being successful is a testament to the original story. How, despite being set in a fictional post-apocalyptic world, it's still so relevant and resonant to people. Though, I'd say that most stories that involve some world-ending virus would resonate these days. You know, with the whole Rona and everything. At the same time, it's incredibly impressive that The Last of Us has managed to find such a massive audience, especially at a time where people are sort of coming off a zombie show fatigue after The Walking Dead. That's the point though. This is not a zombie show. I mean, technically it is, but that's not the reason why you'd watch it. It's the human connection, growth, and sacrifice that makes this journey so great. Honestly, I can't wait to see what other new stuff they added to an already rich story. Alright, that was why Troy Baker thought The Last of Us TV show would turn out to be a failure, and why it's such a massive success. See you in the next one.